Hey guys, so I actually went to Rebecca Yarros's author panel with Lynette Noni as the chair on the 27th of June. I got a signed book. It's so pretty. Look at that. You want a dragon? Earn one. And I also have the book as well, and I'll go through like the signed copy as well at some point. But I haven't actually read the book, and there's been so much like controversy and talk about it, and everyone has some sort of opinion on Fourth Wing. You know, I've had people talk to me and they're like, oh, there's cultural appropriation because the love interest has these tribal tattoos and things like that. And then there's been conversations around her sort of like, I know people were judgmental because she wasn't having a stance on the Palestine-Israel conflict and everything like that, and people were, and then they had other opinions on everything else that happened. But then so many other people have come to me and be like, oh my gosh, I absolutely love it. My auntie messaged me this morning that she's really enjoying it, and I haven't mentioned it to her, and she's never texted me that that she's just enjoying a book before. But I love that, and I love that for her, and I am so keen to read this, but I haven't read it yet. And so that's like the really interesting sort of thing. And I do encourage that kind of perspective of going into something like this where I want to talk about the controversy surrounding Rebecca Yarros, and that more people should just go to author panels blind, basically. There was a study done in 2011, a US psychology study by Nicholas Crestenfield and Jonathan Levitt, that revealed that story spoilers don't actually spoil stories. So it says here, to read stories in which the genre strongly implies the ending suggests that suspense regarding the outcome may not be critical to enjoyment, and may even impair pleasure by distracting attention from a story's relevant details and aesthetic qualities, which I think is really interesting when you consider the genre of romance. So romance, the promise within the genre is that you will have a happy ending. Like, that has to happen for it to be a romance. Romeo and Juliet, not a romance, that is a tragedy. And readers of romance know exactly what they're going to get into going into a book, that they will have a happy ending. But the really interesting thing was at the panel, Rebecca Yarros actually sort of clarified this, that her book is romantic fantasy, or romantasy, if you will, and that it is the main protagonist who is the only person, in this case Violet, who is promised that by the end of the series she will have a happy ending, which is really interesting because romance readers are in it for how do they get their happy ending. Like, how do even enemies to lovers, how do they go from enemies to having their happy ending? And it is like, that's something that's really interesting, and that I think is really keeping a lot of people on the edge of their seats with this book. That it is that, like, you're promised that happy ending, but like, what about the other characters you care about, and how is that going to take place and things? And I actually encourage more people to do this kind of thing, like to either talk about books from just the perspective of what they've heard about them, and I will go into my review once I have read it. But while I'm talking about the controversy surrounding it, I don't want to have the book's quality inform my judgment on that. But even in the panel, they spoke about how when you read the book for the second time, you can finally pick up the different nuances and like finally see the little Easter eggs that have been dropped throughout to inform the twist.
Even in Onyx Storm edits, I've gone back and been like, I think I'm heavy-handed here, I think I'm heavy-handed here, and you have to kind of draw it back, or you have to, you know, layer a little bit more in. So for me, it's a really delicate balance of, I want you guys, you know, catching anyone like by surprise is talent, and you're proud of it, right? When someone's like, I guess the plot twist, you're like, good for you. That's like an insult. But I also want to make sure it's logical. Like, you can't just twist something that, you know, comes out of nowhere. You have to foreshadow it.
Well, and it makes it quite a beautiful experience during the reread. Like, you know, our first read-through is like experiencing the story. And then the second read-through is picking out all the bits that we missed. Like, do we have any rereaders in the room? Have we read?
Yeah.
Yeah. No. There we go. We would have seen all those beautiful bits. They're like, oh, I'm so stupid for not seeing it the first time around. There it is.
I don't want to make you feel stupid.
You do.
I should think I'm smart. Because it's always, but you know.
That's true. Well, the hand in hand with plot twists, we also have cliffhangers, and you are.
Sorry.
I can't even. Yeah.
Should give me some positive sounds out there,
I mean, we love it. We wouldn't be here if we didn't love what you do, but also hate what you do. So, should we expect? Do we need to brace for Onyx Storm? Is there another cliffhanger?
I mean, like, what's your pain tolerance? Like that. It has been. I love the ending scene. Like, I love it. Like, I knew, because I can't write out of order. I don't know about you, I have to write linearly, because the characters aren't who they are at the beginning, or at the end, right? So, if your characters are making the same choices at the end as they did at the beginning, you did not do there's no development, you didn't do your job. So I have to write linearly, but I also feel like that dopamine hit when I know I'm like, I just have to write the scene, can't wait to get to the scene. So I have to save it for last, and like finishing on Storm, I'm just like, I hadn't slept in like 48 hours, I'm just like, here we go. It made like a little, you know.
So when we're all crying and eating chocolate, we'll just envision Rebecca just like really happy.
So I want to just go through some of the like initial qualities of the book, like genre, where it's been sitting in the market, things like that, and how it was marketed too, because this has really been put forth as sort of like a debut romance fantasy. And that is technically correct, because this is the first fantasy novel Rebecca Yarros has ever written, and there is so much hype and interest within debuts and like people's firsts. But when you consider the backlog of her author career, you start to understand that she did not just come out of nowhere and there's been this huge backing for her book. She has been around, she has grown a steady audience, and that has deeply contributed to the success of this novel. And the marketing for that as a debut romantic fantasy, which it is, it's her first fantasy novel.
Because we're talking about Fourth Wing. Here we go. For the author of this book, Rebecca Yarros, this isn't her first dragon rodeo. In fact, she's written quite a few romance novels, but more in the genre of romance, even some military romance as well. A lot of her books seem to be pretty highly rated on Goodreads as well. But this is her first real foray into the fantasy genre. So I guess it's actually is her first dragon rodeo.
The genres of this novel is also really interesting. So it's classified as a fantasy, fantasy fiction, romance novel, romantic fantasy, epic fiction, and high fantasy. Okay, I really have a big question about this book concerning what the reading age of it is, because new adult is a relatively new term that mostly exists within self-publishing. So, you know, on Amazon you can choose a genre that's new adult or have it as a tag and things like that, but it does not exist within the traditional market. And a lot of people have said, you know, do not like if you're trying to sell your book to a publisher, do not advertise it as new adult, because it's just, it doesn't exist basically, and they will not know where to shelve it in a traditional market. Like, would it go on the YA shelf, the adult fantasy, or now there is the like TikTok sensations that not every bookshop has, but that a lot have. And I think that's really interesting that we have that now, because I would say that most of those books would fall underneath the classification of new adult, and they've just put that shelf in, but they haven't considered other kinds of shelves. But anyway, I think that's really interesting, and I would love new adult to exist and be a thing. And I'm really hoping that between Sarah J. Maas and Fourth Wing and a slew of other incredible authors basically writing within that genre, that we can make this happen. And Rebecca Yarros does mention a few things about it on her Twitter, X. She says, let's talk new adult. Some creds first. I've been published in this genre since 2014, and 11 of my 20 books are new adult. And then she goes on to say that she won the CRWA Award of Excellence for New Adult, and that was Eyes Turned Skyward in 2015. And then she says, but the genre does deserve to be written, read, and explored. People don't just morph into adults magically when they blow out the candles on their 18th birthday, unless you're speaking in a legal sense. There's struggle and growth to get there. Sex is just one part of some of the growth for some of those characters, not all. And if you're cracking open a romance novel, I'd expect hormones to be raging at that age, just like science indicates. But it's not sexed up YA, it's adolescence growing into adulthood. Phew, end. But true NA is not sexed up YA because the characters are on their own, growing into adults. See a pattern here? Why is it hard to define the genre or accept it? Because no one knows where to shelve it in brick and mortar stores. It's been an issue since I debuted it in 2014, which does bring up some of the arguments surrounding this. It is interesting though, because if you look at young adult as a classification within the wider world, the age category for it is 18 to 26. But if you look at it within the book industry, the classification is 12 to 18. And you do have lower and upper YA within that. So lower YA is 12 to 14 and upper YA is 15 to 18, but there is still a lot of crossover between that. You still can't like really go and restrict a 12-year-old from finding that YA novel that is for an upper YA audience, and there is so much growth within that period, and it is a very interesting and hard thing to kind of go around. I remember going up to CS Cat at the 2023 Brisbane Writers Festival, which was the first Brisbane Writers Festival I ever attended, and I love CS Cat. Like, they are the most brilliant, amazing human ever. And I came up to them with this question that I was really deeply struggling with. Should I put my book into YA or adult fantasy? And this was, and CS Cat has not read my book or anything like that, and they just said that the market for YA is so much bigger than the adult fantasy market. And so if you can aim your book there and it can go into that category, you should really try to put it there, which I thought was really interesting because that does play a huge role in it. Like, how big is the market of where you're trying to get your book in? I believe it was Danielle Binks who spoke at a panel also in the 2023 Brisbane Writers Festival on what publishers are looking for within YA. And they got onto this topic of new adult and sex scenes in YA. And she said that, yeah, I think sex can serve a really big purpose in YA because it's a first. And you know, Judy Blume revolutionized the inclusion of sex in YA way back in the 70s, and that we should keep dedicating that to her because it was her daughter who was like, I am so sick of seeing like these teenagers have sex and then as soon as they've had sex they die. Like, that's just what continues to sort of happen, and these sort of things do happen all the time. Like, if you have sex in a teenage, you know, book, even if it's like, you know, it seems beautiful, it's always fade to black or the characters kind of die, and there's all these like, oh, these consequences for that, and it doesn't seem to be really perpetuating a good narrative around it. And that's why new adult is so hard to kind of classify, that it was somewhat spawned from, I don't know how true this is, they were just talking about it on the panel, that it came from sort of 50 Shades of Grey was sort of the first new adult novel, because it came from this fan fiction of Twilight. And so it was this, can't put it in YA, but like, where would it belong in the market? And then that's also somewhat messed it up kind of thing, because it's not just new adult with like, you know, sex scenes in it and stuff like that. It's this really like erotic, lustful kind of sex. It's not the first kinds. It's a very confusing industry. But the interesting thing within that sort of like, it's this erotic, lustful, goes into more of the conversation of seeing more of these sex scenes in literature. And women are 64.3% of all readers. And so the market is heavily geared towards females. And it's also low-key because the porn industry is very much marketed towards men. This is sort of our place where it is for us. And I find that conversation also really interesting.
Can you use your imagination over time, do you think?
So they're way more descriptive than porn. Obviously they have to be because of the the language versus the visual component. Porn is almost very like repetitive and predictive, and like it's there and obvious. It's very like banal in that way. Versus this, there's a lot more detail and nuance and creativity to the scenes. Which makes them more interesting, I'd say, than if they were just like, boom, boobs, butt, grabbing it, going, Porn is very visual.
I was going to say, can you see how these, since the authors are women, can you see how they're portrayed in the female gaze to be, like, more romantic or more, like, this is how we would want or portray, like, this is how we would want even porn to be like.
Yeah, there's a lot more dialogue and like the little things that are going on, like where things are being gripped, like what each character is thinking about, the tension of it.
To get more into this, finally, to get into the controversy, to get into the everything that's happening around Rebecca Yarros, not in any way I don't want to be defamatory to anyone when I talk about this. I really want to be in the industry, I really care about it. But in this sense, I want to do all that I can to try and avoid the controversies that go around these sort of things, and to really not get involved in them and hopefully learn from them so that we can avoid them. But it's also just what's happening within the bookish industry, and it is really fascinating, and it deeply entertains me as well. So one of the units I did last year in my creative writing degree was these contemporary debates within writing. And Rebecca Yarros came up a lot. One of the main things she says throughout her author talk is, and it only asks this question of, if you could go back in time and tell your like newly published self one thing, what would it be? And she says, I would go off social media, like I would not be on it. And that is a really interesting point when we delve into these controversies.
But honestly, it's probably the one thing I would have done was delete social media.
Amazing. I think we all like those detoxes every now and then too.
I have a good time with it. It's just a cost versus benefit kind of thing. And sometimes, man, the cost is not there, especially when your kids are the age of my kids, and the things people say, it's not just me seeing it, it's my kids. So I would have deleted it.
Yeah. I hope people are taking notes. Any aspiring authors out there, take that advice.
No. Authors, you probably want your social media. You probably want, to make sure that you can, especially if you're self-published or doing things like that, you want to be able to run your own ads, because self-publishing is so much work. Even in trad, if you want it, I just wish I had.
Plus all the cat names that we would miss out on.
You miss the cat names.
I think this is perfectly justifiable, and that if you reach the level of success that Rebecca Yarros has, that you shouldn't be managing your own social media channels and things. She was speaking to a crowd of 1,600 people, which is insane, and please don't have me go through that. That would be terrifying, honestly. And you can hear the echo of her mic and the echo of all those people like laughing, and it's this booming sound. It was great, but I can only imagine what it would feel like to be in her position. There was like a moment where she remarked on all the phones going up and then all the phones going down, because you know that people are sort of filming your every moment when you're in that position of being a public figure. Like, it is quite scary that you know these things are gonna be replayed and criticized and picked apart, and it's very interesting. The first controversy that I want to talk to you guys about, and that I do value your opinion, so I'd love to just have this kind of discussion with you, is...
So, seeing as, you are the author, you are the source.
I'm getting quizzed, aren't I? Okay.
I just want to know if we could set the record straight on, like, maybe this is how we pronounce them. The war college they attend.
So I say it's Basgiath.
Basgiath. Oh my gosh, I was totally off. I said Basgiath.
And that's a more Gaelic spelling, so or more pronunciation. So it can be right. I say Basgiath because of just how I constructed the words.
The full name of Violet's black dragon.
Oh, Ternanach.
The full name of Violet's gold dragon.
And Darnanwarnam.
I'm gonna be going back to this like now that I know how to pronounce all this. The name of Xaden's dragon.
Sigale.
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 I was just going like scale. Like
Sigale. So
okay.
Sa and Gale.
The name of Mira's dragon.
Tyne. This is
Tyne.
a quiz. You are quizzing me. I'm gonna have a moment where I'm like, I don't know, what dragon is that?
It's more just for me. I really just wanted to know. And then lastly, the name of the kingdom.
Oh, Navarre.
Navarre.
Yeah. A more Gaelic spelling, so or more pronunciation. So that can be right. I say Basgiath.
After seeing that video, I have personal beef with Rebecca Yarros because Rebecca, I truly cannot believe that you wrote a book with Gaelic words in it and you were on an interview calling them Gaelic. Gaelic is a different language. You did not use Gaelic in your book. You used Gaelic, babes. She goes on to wildly mispronounce all of the Gaelic words that she used. I'm not too bothered about the way she pronounces Basgiath, but if you were pronouncing it like a Gaelic speaker, you would say Bas Skia. It's actually two words, Bas, which means death, and Skia, which means wing. She calls Violet's dragon Ternanach. I have no idea who that is. When I read the book, I read Tarnanach, which means thunder. Violet's other dragon, she calls her Andarnanwarnam. I don't know where all those extra syllables are coming from, but they are not in that word. You pronounce it Andarna Uram. It's 3 words and it means the second honour. The worst one is when she calls Mira's dragon Tyne. I don't know who that is. That word is Chenya, and it means fire in Gaelic. It is genuinely laughable to me that American fantasy authors can get away with this. They can use minority languages in such a disrespectful way. They're just pronouncing them like English speakers. She's just sprinkling Gaelic words in there to add a bit of spice to her fantasy book. I am so sick of Americans using Celtic languages because they can't come up with their own names for things. It is incredibly lazy. I know I'll get backlash for this. I know people are going to say, but she wrote the books, but this is the way she wants to pronounce them. That is not how minority languages work. Minority languages, particularly Celtic languages, deserve respect, especially from Americans, fantasy American authors who co-opt them to add a little bit of spice and magic to their fantasy books because they can't come up with their own names for things. It's lazy, it's boring, I'm tired of it.
LearnGaelic.scot is a completely free website that is one of the top results when you search Gaelic dictionary. Rebecca Yarros is completely disrespectful and I loathed her interview that she did. Gaelic is a minority language and should be treated with respect. You don't do that with any other language, and I don't know why American authors again and again think that they can get away with claiming Scottish ancestry multiple generations back and then just be so rude and disrespectful to our language. Now, don't misconstrue what I'm saying. I'm not talking about readers. If you come across words in a book and you don't know how to pronounce it, that's fine. That's what happens when you read. No biggies. I'm dyslexic. It happens. But an author who is doing lots of research to write a story and deliberately picks a minority language and then just decides, I don't care how that's actually supposed to be pronounced, even though it's a real word, I'm just going to pronounce it whatever way I want, that is abhorrent. And I really, really loathe that. Don't be lazy. Make up your own word. Name the dragons whatever you like. Name them a made-up word that you can pronounce however you like. Don't appropriate a minority language and then just make things up with it. It's a real language. It's spoken every day here in Scotland by a lot of people, and we're trying to encourage and foster people to learn the language, to get it back more mainstream and to protect it. And these authors again and again are doing this and are getting away with it. It happened with Outlander, it's now happening with Fourth Wing, and we need to stand up for it. And I really hope other people agree with me here.
I think these women are absolutely lovely, and they raise this really valid point, because writing that includes pieces of another's language and perpetuates this, it's really hard because it perpetuates this belief that you're traveling, that you are interacting with different cultures, especially if they have a real element to them. Like, you feel like you're well-traveled and you're experiencing these different cultures, even though it is just from an American woman, you know? And you should really, like, if you want the experience of these kind of like fantastical in the real world, you should be reading works by authors who speak that language fluently, and by Scottish authors, to feel like you're traveling to these places and these countries and things like that, which is the really hard thing, because then those authors are not being recognized for using their own language in these contexts or such like that. However, I do somewhat believe that you can't say that you want to encourage and foster people to learn the language, to get it back more into the mainstream and to protect it, and then loathe someone for doing exactly that and for bringing so much attention to it. It's complicated. She definitely should have done more research. Like when the book was published, there was like, you know, guides on how to say these things. There were so many different things coming out that she should have definitely explored, and she just shouldn't have done that. But it also goes into this thing of authors are not public speakers. Like, they are just not. And it is very interesting that she has had media training. That is a very rare occurrence. Publishers would not normally give authors media training. They are just awkward AF, and they're expected to somehow be okay within these public platforms that they are expected to attend once you become an author. And I think it should be done a lot more, and that these sort of things should definitely also be covered in them. But yeah, it's I don't even know. But she does mention it in her X account. My publisher: here, have some media training. Let's practice. Me gratefully practices with experts because I'm awkward AF. Publisher: I think you're ready. Me on BBC Radio 2 at 3:30 AM. Hi, I really love my husband and kids. Oh, and I wrote a book too. Words are something that I've obviously agonized over a lot as a writer, but it's also something I've deeply agonized in relation to this and this discussion, because there's a few words in my own novel, If You Die It's Your Own Fault, which are taken from other cultures. And it's something that I'm really quite concerned about, to be honest. And it's something that I have really agonized over and thought about within these things. So much of the fantasy world is inspired by my travels, and my book is all about these different things that I picked up from traveling places and having these whole new experiences of like going to what feels like a whole new world to me. And so much of my book was about connecting all these different things to create this fantasy-esque race or place or something. But yes, so I was exploring North America mostly when I was writing If You Die It's Your Own Fault, and Mexico is one of my favorite places in the world, honestly. And it was so cool. We got to see the pyramids, and we were having all these talks and learning so much about the Aztecs, and we're seeing their pyramids, and we're seeing like the images drawn up of the sacrifices and the cannibalism, and it's so interesting. And that was around the first time that I saw Mictlantecuhtli.
Mictlan, and hence Mictlantecuhtli.
This god who's really, really interesting, and I'd never heard of him before, and I thought it was so fascinating. And there was this statue of him, and he was missing his stomach cavity, and it was so creepy just within the symbolism of it. And I was like, oh, that's it. That's the sort of villain of this book. He's got this missing stomach, and he's this god of death and the land. And I thought, I fell in love with it in a sense. I thought it was so cool and so interesting. And I should have, what I should have potentially done was, if I wanted a god of death, I should have chosen the devil or Hades, or something that is more aligned with my culture. But because I haven't heard about this before, it really drew me in, and I've tried to find anything that I can possibly get my hands on that has or depicts him within the mainstream. Like Maya in the 3 has come out.
All of the Tekka army are marching through the endless forest, my lord. I can already taste their fear.
Michelangelo has like a dog, and Hades has a dog, and like even the main character who was from Earth draws these different comparisons between different things. And I've tried my best to make it okay in a sense. Like I've really agonized over this and tried to figure out, oh, how can I make this okay? And one of the things that I really thought about was that all of these different places within the world have, like, they might call him something different. Like for the south it's Michelangelo, but for another place it might be Hades or some other kind of like deathly evoking name. And the other really big thing that I did that I thought might make it okay, and that might like, was that Michelangelo is this god of death, and he's not really mentioned, he's not a big part of the story, he's just sort of there, and he's this more merciful god to give a different side of the coin. And Mictlan, as he is known, has basically appropriated the god of death's name, and he has stolen it from him to have his own sinister evoking sort of part of it, sort of thing. Like he has chosen it to evoke that deathly sort of like aspect, and because he resembles him in different ways. And that was sort of how I thought more about it. Like maybe I can have it so that this horrible, horrible, evil person has appropriated the name. But it's something I've really thought about, and it's something I really don't know entirely what to do. And should I take it out? Should I just name him something completely different?
As Gaia was born, and as I say that, ready? Guys, I don't speak Gaelic. I'm really sorry that I don't speak Gaelic. I'm really sorry, but I did find a tutor, so next year, as I butcher these words right now, please have some grace for me, because my poor tutor stuck with me. Next year, I will have better pronunciations for you. So I'm very sorry, so please give me some grace tonight.
Is this enough to fix her mistake? That's the real question behind this. Is it? I don't know. Anyway, to sandwich these two controversies, I'd like to talk about some of the things that is generally agreed upon that she does really well within her novel. So the first one is her representation of chronic pain is done really well. I adored the disability representation in Fourth Wing. There were times when I just felt it. While it isn't explicit throughout the book, Violet shows signs of EDS, a chronic condition that Rebecca herself has. Violet has EDS, a chronic condition that affects the body's cognitive tissue. Violet constantly battles with her limitations. These are things that are just constantly said about her work, and that she does really, really well. Secondly, Rebecca Yarros has 6 kids. I don't necessarily agree with posting photos of their faces all the time on social media, but she also posts photos of like her adult partner all the time, and her family is really beautiful, and you can see how much it informs her writing.
F machine, and like if Diamond would be like this little sweetheart to start with, and Snail would be like prickly, like did you know, and then you would match them to their writers that way, or did you kind of have to shape them as you got to know their human counterparts?
They're people to me. So even though they're dragons, in my head, remember, it's a crowd in there, they're people.
Her family is her whole world. If she could have a superpower, she said at the panel, it would be basically to teleport. That way, whenever her kids needed something, she could be there for them, whether they were living in any kind of part of the world. And she also speaks about the evolution of her characters, and also the evolution of her dragons, and how Dana, the youngest dragon, goes basically through to becoming a teenager, and she's like, I was so familiar with that process from having 6 kids that it was just so easy to write. Thirdly, she actually really speaks about coming from a military background. She's even got this post that is, Happy Veterans Day to my favorite veteran. You looked damn good in this uniform, but you've never looked better to me than the 4 years you've been out of it. this leads into our second and last controversy surrounding Rebecca Yarros. Should authors be voicing their political opinions? And it's really interesting and hard because they are given this platform where you can inform a large number of people about whatever you want, really. But are you educated and are you informed enough yourself? But then you come from a military background, but then you have all these other things. And I'm not saying that books don't have biases. They definitely have particular biases, but books can be interpreted. And also, can the author then debunk an interpretation or not, or voice their... It's a lot, to be honest. And she does say, now I cannot find her original posts, but she has this main statement up on her Instagram that was posted on the 16th of October 2023. She says, for those harassing me and spreading false information about my opinion on world events, this will always be it. Children are not collateral damage. This discussion shouldn't be centered on my white, privileged voice, but to those tagging me and throwing around accusations that I support genocide. I will say this, as someone whose grandfather served a Nazi concentration camp as a POW, prisoner of war, and suffered the lifelong physical effects of torture, I find your accusations not only false, but personally insulting. I abhor war in every form, which is why every military book I write delves into the myriad of ways war irrevocably harms people. I've received dozens of documented, nauseating and frightening DNR threats in the past due to my anti-war views, which leaves me hesitant to speak on this platform. I'd rather act by boosting other voices and donating money, which I have. I condemn violence. I am absolutely horrified by the despicable attack on Israel. I'm terrified for the children and Palestinian innocents of Gaza. Their living conditions are inhumane. Both emotions are valid. It's called humanity. I don't know the answer, but I view children as equally precious, no matter where they're born. This isn't taking a both sides stance. This is a human rights stance. As for my book translations, I will always stand against book banning, as I spoke on at the Kennedy Center last week, and refusing a translation is, in my opinion, a form of banning. It denies people who only speak that language access to knowledge, to different opinions, to information and perspectives that can help change hearts and minds. Books spread empathy and understanding in every form. To assume my political stance based on where my publisher for trad books, or I for self-published works, sell my rights for translations would be a mistake. Now please, go donate money to the causes who can help the innocents and elevate the voices that need to be heard. Mine shouldn't have to be one of them. Edited to add Palestinian, as I was educated that only saying children's and innocents in Gaza was harmful, and honestly, I'm just over here doing my best and learning. So yeah, I'm not going to unpack everything in that statement because it is a lot, and I might just sort of let it sit with you. But again, it does just really perpetuate this argument of what is the right course of action. Because our authors, especially those who, as she said, not educated on the topic, meant to give a statement sort of thing, but then she is trying her best to educate herself, and you can see that intention and effort and care, but then it's also, is it once again irresponsible to not use this huge platform that she's created for this altruistic greater good when she can reach 33,000 people with it? I do find it interesting that she brought attention to this platform. Her Instagram has 734,000 followers, whereas her X account has 22,500. But then is she deserving of death threats and things like that because of her political statement? And is that not putting her as an author in a very precarious, dangerous situation because of that? it's very interesting, but it's very hard and it's quite concerning because what do you do? But I think the really interesting thing she said is that I've really taken away from it is that refusing a translation is, in my opinion, a form of banning. I think that's very interesting. And I've heard a lot, as I said, surrounding Rebecca Yarros from every different kind of opinion, and I'm finally very excited to start reading it. It'll be interesting because, as I said, I have not read it yet, and my opinion of it that I've said right now has not been informed by the quality of the work, whether it's good or bad. And I will let you guys know how I actually go with it. I've got this one, and then because I went to the author talk and I really wanted a signed copy, I got another one, and apparently I'm probably going to say all their names wrong, but this one has like 2 extra perspectives, 2 extra chapters from Xander's perspective. Beautiful, beautiful, isn't it? And there we go, there's the signing. It's gorgeous. Can we talk for a quick second though? And this is the really hard thing that I need to talk to you guys about. Matte covers. My sticky, sweaty fingers are not meant for them. And I hate them, honestly. But yeah, this was a lot. But I'll get back to you guys in basically a few seconds, but probably a few weeks, when I finally finish the book. But thanks so much for listening to this little part. I hope it was interesting. Okay, bye guys. Okay, so I wasn't gonna do a full review of this book. I was just gonna be like, yay or nay at the end of this video. But seeing as I have done such a deep dive into the lore and the controversy and all the talk surrounding this book, it would be a disservice not to go into an actual review now with my own bias of having read it. And that was mostly thanks to my darling Max was like, you need to do a proper review. And there's heaps out there, but I think it'll be interesting doing it from this kind of perspective. Okay, I'll see you in that video. Bye.